The views, information, and opinions expressed during the following program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent the views of Access Communications, its representatives, or its employees.
Welcome to Planting Seeds, Philanthropy in Saskatchewan, a show where we aim to connect you to the community impact being made by donors and charities across the prairies. I'm your host, Victor Roman, with the South Saskatchewan Community Foundation. I hope you enjoy the show. Happy to welcome our guest today, Shelley Thiel. So Shelley's actually the board chair at the South Saskatchewan Community Foundation, as well as the CEO of CPA Saskatchewan. We're going to talk a bit today, about the importance of volunteering and lending your skills in the charitable sector, and more specifically, talking about what a board structure looks like, and looking at our foundation's board as an example of that. So yeah, thanks for joining me today, Shelley. Is there anything else you'd like to mention? Like, could you let us know a bit more about your background, what you do kind of day-to-day outside of SSCF as well as within the foundation?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for having me, Victor. I'm quite excited to be here on behalf of the South Saskatchewan Community Foundation. It's just a great opportunity. So as you said, in my day-to-day role, I am the CEO of CPA Saskatchewan. So CPA Saskatchewan is the regulatory body for all chartered professional accountants in Saskatchewan. So I work a little more on the regulatory side, but very focused on strategy and governance there, which I think ties in well with what I'm doing here. So you're right, I'm now the chair of the board of the foundation, so that's exciting. I started on the board in 2019 and became chair of the finance committee rather quickly, I will say. And then I've since chaired the governance committee and worked as vice chair, and now moved into the chair role. So I've seen lots of facets of the foundation, which I think helps me in that role as chair of the full board.
That's great. So how did you find out about South Saskatchewan Community Foundation, and what made you get involved?
Yeah, so interestingly, I was just approached, I would say, two ways. One was by some senior staff, and another was by a board member. I suspect maybe that was coordinated. So I was approached by both to see if I was interested, and I can honestly say I didn't know much about the foundation when I was approached, so did some research and looked into the foundation and thought it was just a very interesting opportunity. So I think it's fair to say I kind of jumped in with both feet, said yes, I would be on the board, and suddenly I was chairing finance committee and on, and here I am. So I was just quite pleased with what I saw the foundation was doing. So I thought it was just a very good opportunity to try to use some of my skills to further that. And I guess in terms of why I thought it was something I wanted to be involved in, there was two aspects that I really like about the foundation. And one was the community focus. Clearly, I mean, the foundation is community focused, making our communities as strong and thriving as we possibly can. So I thought that was, obviously a wonderful focus, but the other was the model. It was something different, something I wasn't used to. I mean, I was typically thinking of, those with philanthropic abilities to, donate to a charity, but the opportunity here to have those donations really leave a legacy. So, if someone wants to donate, whether it's $1,000 or $1 million, that money can be used to fund the charity of their choice really forever. And that model really appealed to me. I thought it was something very interesting and just a very different opportunity for those who are able to donate. So I was quite fascinated by the model and also the community, the piece of it. So the two pieces fit together. I mean, they obviously go together, right? So that's really what intrigued me as I went along.
Just everything you said there really resonates with me because, I started as an employee at the organization in 2020, but I was involved from the charitable side as someone who received grants. And my perception before getting to South Saskatchewan Community Foundation is that, it's a funder and it's a place that charities can get money, but I didn't understand the model and the legacy model until I started. My assumption was that it worked kind of, in a similar way to when you apply, in Saskatchewan, you could apply through the Community Initiatives Fund or United Way for funding. But yeah, the model of a community foundation, and specifically ours within that, really is unique, and that ability for somebody to give once but then have that donation just grow and grow and give forever is something that really astounded me when I joined, and it's nice to hear, you know, someone with the CPA background and the accountant background and more of that financial lens to look at that and also say, like, that's one of the main reasons why you were appealed to it. It's really interesting to me just to hear that. Maybe let's talk a little bit more about the legacy model itself and what exactly it was within that you found interesting and different. Like, what was the aha moment where you saw how the impact here is different than it could be? For example, the example we use is, you know, if you make a one-time donation, that impact donates once and then it's done essentially. But from the finance side of things, what does it mean when somebody can give, you know, that $1,000 or that $1 million and have that last forever and give forever? Like, from your perspective, what does that mean for the charitable sector?
Yeah, and I certainly think there's a place for both, right? There's the one-time donation and also the more sort of legacy or endowed funding. And I think the benefit to the charitable sector is they have a better sense of what that funding will be annually. So, you know, more able to sustain their business going forward. They have a good sense of, you know, where their budgeting can go and how much money will be coming in on an ongoing basis from that specific donor, that specific grant. So I think that's very important for the charitable sector. I think it's a lot of stability. The one-time donations, those are wonderful as well, but this provides them with, you know, a little more stability annually, and they can build that into their operations as they go forward and the different programs that they are able to offer. So I see the benefits there.
Great. I want to talk a bit more about kind of the structure of a board. I think that's something that is a bit of an unknown for people. But before we get there, I wanted to get a little bit more of a kind of a personal insight into your background with community giving, but both through SSCF or before SSCF. Like, what kind of experience do you have with community giving or charitable giving in your own experience?
Yeah, so when I think of sort of volunteering and charitable giving, I always think of a sort of big picture. There's like the financial side, the giving, but there's also the volunteer side, the giving of someone's, you know, time or the skills that they have. A lot of my involvement earlier would have been related to a lot of my children's activities. That would have been where I would have focused a lot of my volunteering, more kind of hands-on, right? As opposed to being on a board. So a lot of work there. I've also been very involved, was actually with Canadian Diabetes, involved with them for about 20 years. So I sort of saw the charitable giving from a bit of a different perspective with that, because it was, you know, a lot of door-to-door campaigns. It was, you know, small one-time donations, important. So saw it from that perspective, you know, a lot more. Been involved with my church finance committee, and during that time, you know, a new church was built. So saw that from the perspective of raising funds, both. And I see a bit of a parallel here, both from the perspective of raising the funds to actually build the church, but also raising funds on an ongoing basis to fund the operations. So it's kind of the two sides, which I can kind of almost equate to the two types of donations, sort of the one time and then the ongoing. So involved from that perspective. But the work that the foundation does is actually quite new for me, or was quite new when I joined, and I actually quite like the challenge of learning something new and just going down a different path and just a better understanding of different ways to contribute, you know, to our communities. You know, I thought probably in quite a traditional way of, you know, like a one-time donation. I think this really opened my eyes to different ways, you know, of going down this path, and also see the connection that the foundation has with the community. I didn't realize that at first either. You know, I saw it from working with the donors, not so much with the actual communities and the charitable and not-for-profit organizations. So a bit of that's the history, a bit of that's maybe what I see now.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about giving in the sense that, you know, when your kids were growing up, it was easy to be involved with community organizations that way, but then coming to a board setting like South Saskatchewan Community Foundation was kind of new territory. And when it comes to the volunteerism aspect of it, the thing that really strikes me as important, especially when you look at board of directors, is just the vast types of skills that boards really need, that I don't know if everybody recognizes that the skills that they have at their like 9-to-5 job are actually transferable and useful to give back to community. And, you know, from my own experience on board of directors, depending on kind of where you come from, it can be really hard, for example, to find a treasurer specifically. So kind of a call to action, I guess I would have to the audience is, you know, even if you're not sure of like the skills you have, that there still might be a place for them within the charitable sector that's actually really, really useful. Like you say, the finance committee, sitting on the board, using your skill set in a way that really supports an organization that might be doing something technically a little bit different than it. And maybe now would be a good time to, what I want to do here is, I think the board of directors structure, before you're in it and before you actually see how it works, it can be a huge unknown to people. So I think we have a bit of an opportunity right now to give people an idea of, what does a board of directors look like? What are some of the functions that it has? How do committees work on it? What is the sole purpose, of a governing board? And maybe by using the example of our foundation, we can give some more insights into that. So, from your perspective, what does SSCF's board structure actually look like?
Yeah, so the board is made up of a maximum of 12 persons. And I would say right now 12 people come from very different backgrounds, which is exactly what I think a board needs. I mean, you need that diversity of thought and skills and backgrounds. So I think the board is well positioned in that way. And I think that's a critical piece that we're not all thinking exactly the same. We don't come with the same skills. We don't come with the same backgrounds. Otherwise, we're just all going down the same path. And we need to challenge each other, right? So we need to have different perspectives in order to really challenge each other to help the board perform well and ultimately to help the organization perform well. So I think that's one of the critical pieces, that we come with our own skills. And I think your comment about people are nervous about being on a board. I haven't done much of this. I mean, I've done quite a bit of work, as a CPA on committees and dealt with governance and strategy. So I'm, fairly comfortable there. But board members don't need to be completely comfortable there. They just need to come with the skills they have. And I think some board members, will have the stronger governance strategy skills, and other board members will bring something different to the table, which I think was equally important. I think if we all come exactly the same, we're certainly not going to accomplish the same good things we could if we come, with different thoughts. So I guess I would just encourage anyone who's interested in, whether it's a specific charity or whoever it might be, to get involved, because others who are involved will help bring you along. I think I agree with you. People are hesitant to just jump in because they think, I don't have the experience, I don't have the skills. There's an awful lot of people who know more than me. But I think the key to that, you have to have the passion to do it. You have to, take the time and just invest yourself in that. I also think, when you're involved, you're giving, but more than anything, you're learning. I mean, I've learned so much on this board, and I continue to learn every day. Every meeting, you learn something, and I think. For anyone's interested, I think it's both. You're giving of your time, you're giving of your skills, regardless of what those skills are, but you're also getting an awful lot back, both in what you learn, but also in what you see going on, around you.
You kind of mentioned that it's a two-way street there. You're giving your time, but you're also learning and getting things yourself. Is there anything kind of since your time at South Saskatchewan Community Foundation, while you've been on the board, that you've learned or been a part of that's really stood out to you?
The one thing that has stood out at a couple of events where there have been representatives from some of the charities that have been funded, where they've come and actually spoke to those in attendance, particularly donors, and talked about what the donations have meant to them and talked about the work that they have done. And that to me has been one of the highlights and something that stood out, because those who have come, some of the work being done in our communities is unbelievable. Had no idea some of this was happening. So just fascinating to see, what I'm sure they think of themselves as just the average person doing what they're passionate about, but doing absolutely phenomenal work in the community. And so for me, some of the different work that's being done, I just find absolutely fascinating, whether it's, it might be with Indigenous peoples, it might be with youth, it might be with those who are a little more troubled, or it might be with those disadvantaged for all sorts of reasons. But there's just so many different places that someone can make a difference in the communities, and that's really has stuck out to me as just some of those conversations and some of the presentations. I truly had no idea. I think maybe most of us don't. Some of the great things that go on in our community, and if I tie that back, that is enabled by the donations that are being made, because it is providing the funding. So that's really what sticks out to me, is just some of those, in my mind, very individual stories, which are really representative of all the things that are happening in, really in southern Saskatchewan.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, this is being on the board, you mentioned getting to see some of those stories. I can say personally, I'm in a very privileged position because I'm the manager of community impact, which essentially means I'm talking to charities all the time. This show we created
right.
because we know that these stories are out there. We wanted to share, what's the information about the charitable sector that people, as a donor or as a potential volunteer, or even just as another charity might find interesting or find useful. And yeah, there's just endless amounts of just amazing stories of amazing work that's happening. And as I mentioned in my role, I'm really privileged because I oversee our grants, I oversee the charitable things. So I get to look through a list of here's, the hundreds of projects going on every year that are impacting so many different people in so many different places. And it really is just fascinating to see. And the perspective that I always bring into it, and I think what you mentioned, you get a little bit of a glimpse of it, and I'm hoping that we can do even more, is, the world, especially since 2020, the world got shaken up. Yeah. Things got a lot more difficult. And it's nice to see that there's so many people, though, that are working towards positive change all the time. There's an entire sector of people just trying to make sure, especially during times like the pandemic, that people have the necessities they need. Food shelters worked incredible hours, and donors stepped up and helped out in incredible ways during that time. And it is really, optimistic, I think, to see the work that is being done, and we get to see it in maybe a different lens than other people might. With our involvement at the foundation. And I just think, just in general, that's a comment that, being on the board or being a staff member, it's really enlightening, getting that window into that.
Yeah, I agree. Impact. And I think there's a lot of negative in the world right now as well. It's challenging to see some of the need in the community. I mean, it's sad, some of the things that is seen. But then you see the other side. You see the good in people. You see people who are willing, to step out and help and do whatever they can do. And whether it's sitting on a board or whether it's what I call the doers, the people who are hands on the ground or feet on the ground, doing the work. It's just very positive to see that and to see, just how people come together to help each other. So I completely agree. I mean that is absolutely a highlight.
Going a bit more into a deep dive into boards themselves. So I know with our board specifically, there's committees. Can you tell me a little bit about the committees, how those work? Yeah. To be honest, this is actually something I don't know a ton about, so I'm hoping to learn a bit.
Yeah, so the board has 4 committees. Some that might be your typical committee, some that are a little more I think just as a result of the work the foundation does. So has a governance committee, has a finance committee, and a nominating committee, which I think are pretty common to most boards, but also has a community investment and stewardship committee, which is, a little bit different, but it's just the nature of the work. And, an awful lot of the real detailed work is done by the committees, and then, the results of that are brought to the board. And on those committees, on a few of them, we actually have some outside members on the committees, so they're not actual board members, but they bring an expertise that is needed on that committee. So for example, on the finance committee, there's members of that committee who bring an expertise that is needed and a lot of experience. So just getting some really good skills in those committees so that they can bring that work up to the board. So we always say the committees do the detailed work and then bring sort of the bigger decisions up to the board level.
Yeah. You mentioned there that, so the board limit is 12, that's right?
That's right.
But then the committees you mentioned can have outside members. How does that work?
Yeah, so the committees, there is an ability to have outside members. So I'm just trying to think of the numbers on the finance committee. There's about 6, and of those 6, maybe there's 7. 2 of them are not actual board members. One of them is actually a past board member who has just phenomenal skills in that area. And another is, someone who's quite new to the foundation. So they just bring some different skills, but they are full committee members. They're full voting members. At a committee meeting, they behave and are treated exactly the same as every other person in the room. I just think it brings some diversity of thought and of skills to the committee. And I think that is important if you need those skills somewhere to help in the organization at a governance level to oversee the work that's being done. I think it's absolutely essential that you find a place like where those skills, where you can find them and you can bring them to the committees or to the board.
Well, that's great. More general, like just a comment with the charitable sector is, we talked about, there's a lot of, I guess there can be intimidation to join a board of directors, or those unknowns of how it even works can stop people from thinking, oh, like maybe my skills aren't quite right from this. But I just have two comments on this, and maybe if you want to add anything. But one is that, every charity needs a board. That means that there's a lot of volunteers that are needed to help run boards. I know from both my experience talking to other charities and my experience being on different boards is that it can be really challenging for a lot of charities that don't have a lot of the resources to be loud in the community to also recruit board members specifically. So I think if someone is watching or listening and they're thinking, this sounds interesting to me, but I don't think my skills work, my answer is they probably do somewhere. And just start reaching out to charities. Think about the charities that you really care about, and they might tell you that our board is full, but you have a committee that you could potentially be on, or they might just say, our board is full, but here's an organization that is similar to us that you might be able to reach out to, or they might have room on their board. And from my experience, a lot of times that there is room on the board for different places where they can use people's skills from the community. And like we said, it's from all different sorts of sectors. It doesn't need to just be finance. It doesn't need to be someone who specifically works already within the charitable sector. Like people with lived experience and a diverse amount of lived experience makes a strong board. And on that note, with the foundations board specifically, I know you talked a little bit with me before about just the vast type of experience that people have. Do you want to maybe let people just have an idea of like what kind of experience is on our board? And I'm hoping that gives a more broad view of, the types of skill sets that someone else can look at.
Yeah, so the experience on our board is diverse. If I kind of think through, what people either do for a living, or some of them are retired, what they did for a living. We have obviously people working in the financial area. We have people who work in a governance area. We have people who've worked in engineering. We have people who've worked more in an educational area. I mean, they come from all different places. Someone who worked in banking at some point, and just really coming from all different places, which I think is important. I mean, if we all had a financial background only, I don't think we would have the diversity. I don't think we could get ourselves to where we need to be. So I think that's just critically important that there is a place for everyone. And your comment about if you're not sure, reach out. I think reach out to whatever your passion is. So if there's a charity, or it doesn't have to be a charity. If there's an area you're very interested in, I think you can just reach out to someone in that sector. And even not every board operates the same. No. So South Saskatchewan Community Foundation, our goal is to be a governance board. Yes. So, we're to oversee the operations and for the most part keep our hands out of the operations, the oversight. But some boards are much more operational. I mean, they are quite involved, especially very small organizations. The board has to be a little more, on the ground doing some of the work. So it also depends what appeals to someone. Do they want to be more at that governance level, or do they really want to be more engaged, doing some of the day-to-day work almost and being quite involved? And I think my advice, Sam, would be just reach out and talk to someone, because even if you reach out to a specific charity and they don't have a place for you right now, they may actually know of another charity who does, because I think within the sector there's lots of conversations, and if you've got someone with the interest and the passion and whatever knowledge and skills they bring, those are all valuable. There will be a place for them. There will be a place for them to get involved. But taking that first step can be challenging. If you've never been on a board, you've never done that, you just don't even know who to reach out to. And I think it's just a matter of almost picking one, reaching out, and seeing where you can get. But I've never heard that we have an excess of volunteers. There's always more volunteers needed. So I think there's an absolute role for anyone who's interested in volunteering.
Yeah, and that's been a theme. I've said it many times on this show already, on other episodes too. But like a theme right now is, coming out of 2020, like the world needed more volunteers before then, but a lot of people have gotten out of that habit and aren't volunteering now that maybe were before. And like now more than ever is the time to step up and find ways to volunteer. Finding an organization that needs a board member is a great way to volunteer. Like you said, it can be a little bit intimidating.
Yeah.
I think it's worth kind of daring to take that step. I mean, most organizations too, they'll have onboarding packages. You're not left in the wild. Generally, there will be direction, there's guidance. You're joining a team of people generally who also already have experience. So there's always room to be the new person. And there's a lot of value in being the fresh set of eyes and ears in a room as well. With that, we're just going to wrap it up here right away. So I really wanted to just say thank you for giving us some information regarding this. I'm hoping that this, gives people a little bit more of an idea of just the role of a board within an organization. I think everything, just for context, we talked about was more governance boards. So if people are looking into operational boards, that's something I'd encourage people to maybe reach out and search. But yeah, I just want to thank you a lot for joining us, and we're really happy to have you on our board and to have the CEO of CPA Saskatchewan for an organization that really focuses on the financial funding of donors. I think gives a lot of trust to our community as well. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome, and thank you very much for having me. I certainly am proud of the work that the South Sask Community Foundation does. The staff management are absolutely excellent. The board works very well, and I think it's really goes a long way to help grow our community, to make our communities better and stronger. So just thank you to you and all the team who does all the work to really make all of this work. So,
Yeah.
so thanks so much.
Perfect. Thanks as well. Thank you for tuning in today. If you'd like to learn how you can make an impact in your own community, visit the South Saskatchewan Community Foundation online at sscf.ca or find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, or Spotify.
If you'd like to share your feedback on the program you just watched, contact us today